Costs for maintenance are then.
This beach vigil last night honored all the victims.
We're trying to do the best we can. Set a good example to be strong.
No one has been found alive since last Thursday, but hope still breathes here. Mark Strassman, CBS News, Surfside, Florida.
I'd like to bring in condominium attorney Kevin Hirzel to talk more about this. Kevin, welcome. Thank you for joining us. First off, when it comes to a condominium like this one, who is responsible for the cost of maintaining the building? Is that each individual condominium owner?
Yeah, it's each individual owner. So typically what happens under the condominium documents is the board is responsible for setting an annual budget. Those costs for maintenance are then assessed to the owners. So certainly in this particular case, there was a $15 million assessment that had been put out there in order to make repairs to the building.
So that would have been then divided to each individual owner. And I can imagine that that is a pretty big price tag, right? That's not a normal amount of a normal like maintenance assessment?
No, not at all. So typically what will happen is an association will do something called a reserve study. So they budget over time, and they build up a reserve fund to take care of repairs such as this. If there's insufficient funds in the reserve fund, or if the association has insufficient repair or funds to take care of the repairs, they have two options. They can go ahead and they can get a community association loan to pay for the repairs, or they can impose an assessment. And sometimes it's a combination of both, which appears to have been what happened here.
So we are learning that there were warnings about the extensive damage within this building. Why were things allowed to progress for so long if there were so many warning signs leading up to this? Is it simply because of the size of the price tag? It just made it hard to absorb?
Projects like these are often difficult to undertake, and they take time. So I think this was kind of a perfect storm of events. The one thing I do want to point out is we don't even know what has caused this yet. So it's entirely possible that even if they had made all the repairs in the report, that this still could have happened. You know, certainly if there was an issue with the subsurface or water levels, that could have impacted it. It could be the responsibility of the neighboring property owner. There was construction that occurred there. The contractor has begun construction on the building as well. So certainly it's a little too early to conclude that anybody specifically was at fault here.
Right. You know, President Biden is calling for a federal investigation into the collapse. What would that entail, and how long could it take? And certainly, would it help sort of crystallize the situation?
That would definitely take years. There's going to be city, state, and federal investigations into this. What I think that's eventually going to lead to is probably changes in the building code. You're definitely going to see those and increased inspections, the frequency of those inspections by governmental entities. I also think that you're going to probably see some legislation related to reserve studies and reserve funding requirements to put, I guess, greater emphasis on associations doing those on a regular basis. Some states have laws that require that, others that don't. You know, Florida is certainly one of those. So there's a formula that they have in place to determine how much should be set aside based on the reserve studies. What I can tell, this association actually, had been in contact with an engineer. They were getting reports. They were making progress to get things done. The issue is that it certainly takes time because you have to get an engineering report. Then you have to figure out how to finance it. You have to get buy-in from the owners. Certainly right now, construction is difficult, what we've gone through with COVID-19 and material shortages. So a lot of projects are being delayed for those reasons as well. So it's not something, unfortunately, that can happen overnight. And with respect to the warning signs, there's nothing that has indicated that there was imminent danger of collapse of this building. I mean, in fact, the people on the board that were making these decisions, they lived there. They were occupants of the building. And unfortunately, the vice president of the association is one of the people that's still unaccounted for.
Right, that's what makes the situation so terrifying and so tragic because, as you mentioned, the condo association knew about the damage and had already voiced concerns about it and, as you said, was on the way towards trying to rectify it. A letter was sent to residents in April explaining the repairs that were needed and that the cost would probably be in the millions. But as you pointed out, a spokesperson for the Champlain Towers South Board says the inspectors never described the damage as imminent, right, or, immediately dangerous. So if this is the case, I know the investigation is still ongoing and will take a while, but obviously this is going to generate a lot of litigation. So when all is said and done, who could be held accountable for what, and what consequences could they face?
Sure. There may be a difference between who's actually responsible and who's legally liable here. So those are probably going to be two different things. So what I've been reading so far is there may have been issues with the original design of this, with what the original developer did, that they added an extra floor, a penthouse, that normally not would have been done at the time. The developer is long gone, the statute of limitations has expired, but based on the original design, there could have certainly been some problems there. We certainly have issues with the city themselves. They came out, they performed inspections, they actually attended an association meeting and told the owners in 2018 that everything was okay. So they may have some responsibility here, but based on governmental immunity, there may be difficulty actually holding them liable. Certainly the engineers that came out that provided advice to the association board members, the board members themselves are not required to be experts in everything about the condominium. Their job is to rely on the advice of experts. The engineers, certainly what's going to be looked at in this litigation is whether or not they provided good advice and timely advice to the association and the board of directors. Certainly right now, everybody's looking at the association and the board of directors, and the issue is going to be whether they acted timely, whether they acted quick enough, whether they had sufficient warning, and should they have made a different decision. Certainly it appears that what came out today, that back in April, they did warn the residents that there was an issue here, and it was significant. As best as I can tell, the condo board did communicate what they knew about the issues to the owners. This does not appear to be a situation where they were holding information back. So if that's the case,
referenced climate change in both his speech and his op-ed. He noted the extreme heat